Ballot item number 25, Order M64, second reading of Bill 64, an act to amend the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities Act and the Employment Standards Act 2000. Ms. Sattler.
The member for London West.
Thank you, Speaker. I move second reading of Bill 64, an act to amend the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities Act and the Employment Standards Act 2000.
Ms. Sattler has moved second reading of Bill 64, an act to amend the Ministry of Training, Colleges and University Act and the Employment Standards Act 2000. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for a presentation. The member for London West.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise today in this House on behalf of the people I represent in London West to speak to Bill 64, the Protecting Interns and Creating a Learning Economy Act. Some of you will know that before I was elected, I was Director of Policy at a research firm that specialized in post-secondary education. Since my election, and in particular since taking on the critic role for training colleges and universities, I've been given an opportunity that few policy researchers have been given before, a chance to put policy into practice, to draw on my own research to inform legislative change and shape the public debate. This private member's bill is based on findings from a research study I led for the Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario between 2010 and 2013, which involved surveys of more than 10,000 Ontario students, 3,600 faculty, and a telephone survey of 3,300 randomly selected Ontario employers. But as well as being evidence-based, my bill is also strongly supported by stakeholders across the post-secondary labour market and economic development sectors, and I'm very proud to have had the support of those stakeholders in developing and refining this bill. I want to particularly thank and recognize three of those stakeholders who joined me here this morning at a media conference: Claire Seaborn from the Canadian Intern Association, Naguib Gouda from Career Edge, and Peggy Jarvie from University of Waterloo, the world's largest co-op provider, who joined me here this morning, and Claire and Naguib are in the gallery to support my bill. So the purpose of Bill 64 is to expand high-quality, work-integrated learning programs for post-secondary students and end the proliferation of exploitative, unpaid internships. Work-integrated learning is the umbrella term for co-ops, internships, field placements, practicums, and other kinds of work experience programs that are offered at Ontario colleges and universities. They can be mandatory or voluntary, they can last a few days or up to a year, but the important thing is that they are integrated into a student's program of study and that they include a strong pedagogical component, enabling the student to critically reflect on his or her workplace experience. By providing more opportunities for post-secondary students to gain relevant work experience while they are studying, my bill will help reduce unethical and often illegal unpaid internships that exploit graduates' desperation to get career-related experience after they finish school and simply provide free labour for employers. Too many graduates feel that an unpaid internship is the only hope they have of getting a job in their field. They know that work experience matters, and in fact it's perhaps the most important factor in determining whether they'll be able to get a job. As Ontario continues to struggle from the recession, youth unemployment remains higher today than it was in 2007, and young people face significant barriers entering the labour market. 1 in 5 young people who are not working today has never held a job, and that includes increasing numbers of post-secondary graduates. This creates a vicious cycle of can't get a job without experience and can't get experience without a job. To address this crisis, business organizations like the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the Conference Board of Canada are leading the call for a much greater focus on post-secondary work-integrated learning programs. Last October, the Chamber urged government, education providers and employers to work together to allow more students to reap the benefits of work-integrated learning. Progressive think tanks like the Canadian Centre on Policy Alternatives have made similar recommendations, urging much greater use of innovative work-integrated learning programs to address youth joblessness. So there are two parts to my bill. The first schedule is about college and university work-integrated learning programs, and the second schedule is about unpaid internships. Schedule 1 brings together students, post-secondary institutions, and employers, as well as stakeholders from the economic development and labour market sectors in a provincial advisory council on work-integrated learning. The council's mandate is to make recommendations to the Minister of Training in colleges and universities on how to engage more employers in providing paid work-integrated learning experiences, how to improve oversight of unpaid work-integrated learning, and better support post-secondary institutions to deliver quality work experiences, and how to ensure that qualified students are able to access these programs across faculties and fields of study. By increasing the number of paid opportunities, students will be able to earn while they learn, helping to offset tuition fees that are higher in Ontario than in any other province. Finally, the bill defines work-integrated learning and establishes criteria to ensure quality workplace programs. This responds to concerns that are raised when students on placement are asked to do filing or similar menial tasks, work that does not provide any educational benefit to the student and simply offsets payroll costs for the employer. Section 2 of my bill amends the Employment Standards Act to protect students in work-integrated learning programs and prevent illegal unpaid internships. Currently, the Employment Standards Act does not apply to secondary or post-secondary students who are doing work experience, and it also doesn't apply to individuals who are receiving training that meets 6 very narrow conditions. While the Premier and Minister of Labour have said publicly that this is enough to prevent unpaid interns know better. Too many employers are using the training exemption to avoid paying their interns, regardless of whether the conditions for exemption are met. Just take a look at Kijiji or Craigslist or Reddit, and you'll see hundreds of ads for unpaid positions. New Democrats strongly supported the legislation that was passed in the fall that brought these groups under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to allow students and trainees the right to refuse unsafe work. We believe, however, that more is needed to protect students in work-integrated learning programs. Under my legislation, secondary and post-secondary work experience students and trainees will be covered by Basic Employment Standards Act protections, such as limits on hours of work, guaranteed breaks, leaves of absence, and vacation days. They will continue to be exempt from the minimum wage provisions of the ESA, which is exactly the model that is in place right now in the Alberta Employment Standards Code. In addition, my bill introduces new requirements to ensure that employers aren't illegally using unpaid interns to do the job of paid staff. Like many of you, I was shocked to learn last summer that a Ministry of Labour enforcement blitz found that 42% of employers with interns were not meeting their legal responsibilities under the Employment Standards Act. My bill takes proactive measures to protect interns by requiring the publication of a poster about interns' rights to be posted conspicuously in Ontario workplaces, and requiring employers to provide written notice to both the intern and the ministry about conditions of work and whether the Act applies. This will allow the collection of data on the extent of internships in Ontario, which is a huge gap in our knowledge and something we simply do not have access to right now. Finally, the bill creates a clear and transparent system to allow anonymous and third-party complaints about contraventions of the Act. Right now, we have unpaid interns who fear that if they report their employer for a violation of their rights under the Employment Standards Act, they will be blacklisted from ever being able to get into the career, which is why they were doing an unpaid internship in the first place. Economists know that unpaid internships are bad for the economy. They privilege those who can afford to work for free, who have families who are able to financially support them. Employers who rely on unpaid interns as their talent pipeline risk losing out on an enormous pool of potential talent because they are excluding those who can't afford to work for free. This legislation is critical to my riding of London West, a region that has been hard hit by the collapse of the manufacturing sector, but is home to two of the largest and finest post-secondary institutions in Ontario, Western and Fanshawe. Our young people in London are bearing the brunt of the recession. There was an 11.2% decline in the proportion of youth who were employed in London between 2007 and 2014, a decrease greater than any other Ontario city. We recognize that our economic success relies on our ability to attract and retain young talent, and there is no better retention strategy than making sure there are jobs for graduates after they complete their diploma or degree. The evidence is clear. Local employers who invest in training paid co-op students or interns are very likely to offer employment after the work placement ends, which keeps jobs in our community. It connects young people to the employers and the workplaces where they've done their placements. This week, the government launched a review of the Employment Standards Act and indicated that they were interested in knowing what kinds of changes need to be made to protect precarious workers. What better place to start than with unpaid interns, who are perhaps among the most precarious workers and most vulnerable workers in our province. It's time to end the exploitation of young people in illegal, unpaid internships. It's time to create a better system of oversight for students who are doing work placements through their post-secondary or secondary school of study. And it's time to give trainees and students the basic workplace protections that we all have and they deserve. Ontario students need more opportunities to gain relevant workplace experience while they are studying, so they don't feel compelled to take an unpaid internship after they graduate. This bill will make a huge difference for people in my riding of London West and across this province, and I urge all MPPs on all sides of the House to support this legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the